Godfrey caught Helena Yardley's wrist before her gloved hand could strike Isabella a second time, his fingers closing so firmly that the kid leather tightened across her pulse. The first slap had already cracked across the lantern-lit terrace. It left heat spreading over Isabella's cheek, while the music faltered and every scarlet-coated officer beneath the rose arch turned to stare. The Duke of Kingsmere stood between the two women, his grip controlled but unyielding, his face alive with a fury too swift to conceal. "Lower your hand, Helena." Isabella did not touch her cheek. She had learned long ago that pain attracted less notice when one behaved as though it did not exist. Her gloves were tucked into the sash of her plain cream gown. Helena had ordered her away from the dancers to repair a fallen garland, as though Isabella were one more useful object belonging to the Darnley household, a dependent companion, a poor relation.
A woman expected to be grateful for every chair she occupied and every crust she ate.
A moment earlier, Lady Marchmont had admired the pale climbing roses trained over the terrace arch. Helena had accepted the praise with a smile. Isabella had spoken only because the dowager asked where such a rose might be obtained. "The seed was bred by my mother, Lady Ophelia Wycliffe," she had said. "I cultivated these plants from her stock." Helena had turned. The blow had followed. Now she strained against Godfrey's hold. "She is lying, Kingsmere. She is my aunt's charity, and she has forgotten herself." "I saw who forgot herself." His voice was rough, not loud. "You will not touch her again." He released Helena only when her arm had lowered. A murmur moved through the guests. No one came nearer. Mrs. Penrose, who had asked Isabella that afternoon to identify a blight upon her pear trees, drew her daughter a full pace backward. The movement opened a pale crescent of empty gravel around Isabella, as though disgrace itself might stain a hem. Several ladies looked away from Isabella's reddened cheek, as though modesty required them not to witness what they had already permitted. Isabella looked down. Her reticule had struck the stone balustrade and opened. A folded paper packet lay torn upon the gravel. Tiny ivory rose seeds, her mother's last viable stock, had scattered beneath the hem of Helena's gown. She knelt at once. "Leave that rubbish," Helena said. Her satin slipper came down near Isabella's fingers. One seed vanished beneath it, with a faint turn of gravel. Godfrey moved so quickly that Helena stumbled back. He placed himself between her and Isabella, his shoulders blocking the lamps. "Another step," he said, "and you will leave this house before the next dance begins." Then he glanced down at Isabella. He did not seize her arm or make a display of raising her. He merely held the space around her, while she gathered what she could. When she had folded the surviving seeds into the torn paper, he said, "Miss Wycliffe, will you come inside?" The question surprised her more than his anger. She rose, brushed the grit from her bare hands, and nodded. He escorted her from the terrace. Behind them, the musicians began again too quickly. The county wished to prove that nothing improper had happened, but something had. Isabella felt it in every stare pressed against her back. The Duke had stopped the blow. He had also placed her at the center of a scandal she could not afford. The library doors closed upon the garden music. Isabella stood near the unlit hearth, while her widowed aunt, Mrs. Theodosia Darnley, hurried in after them. Helena followed with her chin high and one glove twisted in her hand. Godfrey could not keep still. He crossed the carpet once turned and faced Helena. "You will apologize." To her, Helena gave a brittle laugh. "She contradicted me before Lady Marchmont and attempted to steal credit for my aunt's gardens. She answered a question about a rose. She arranged the entire scene to attract your notice." Isabella closed her eyes for one breath. There it was, already the easier tale. A dependent woman could not possess skill, only schemes. Godfrey stopped pacing. You struck her before 50 witnesses. It was a correction. It was cruelty. Helena's face sharpened. You would end our engagement over a companion's bruised cheek.
Yes. The single word landed harder than a shout. Godfrey's chest rose once. His temper was still there, bright and dangerous, but his decision did not waver. I will not marry a woman who strikes those she believes powerless. My carriage will take you home. Helena stared at him. Then she looked at Isabella. You will regret this, Kingsmere. And you, Miss Wycliffe, will learn that a duke's indignation does not purchase bread. She left without an apology. Theodosia sank into a leather chair and pressed a hand to her brow. The Darnley season is ruined. Helena's acquaintance was our only remaining consequence in the county. She turned on Isabella. I gave you a home. I clothed you. And you repay me by quarreling over a flower? I told the truth, Aunt. The truth is a luxury for women who can pay for their own fires. Theodosia's voice dropped. Tomorrow, you will write to Helena. You will retract your claim and beg pardon. Refuse, and you may pack your trunk. I will give you a fortnight. Godfrey turned with such force that the chair beside him shifted. You will not put her out. She is my niece, Your Grace. Her conduct is my concern. She is not a parcel to be punished for embarrassing you. Theodosia rose. Come, Isabella. Godfrey stepped toward her. Miss Wycliffe Kingsmere has rooms enough. My widowed aunt is expected next week, and Mrs. Bell keeps a house no gossip has ever breached. You may remain here under their protection. He meant it. That was the danger. Even with a Duchess Dowager in residence, Isabella's arrival on the night his engagement ended would become its own evidence. By breakfast, Helena would be the discarded bride, and Isabella the artful dependent who had stolen her place. No, Your Grace. Godfrey looked as though she had spoken in a language he did not know. No, I cannot exchange my aunt's charity for yours. It would give Lady Helena the very story she intends to tell. His hands flexed. He was built to meet obstacles at a gallop. Refusal stopped him like a wall. Then his gaze fell upon Isabella's work basket, abandoned near the desk. A roll of vellum protruded beneath her mending. He drew it free and opened it. Her sketches spread across the leather blotter, the old winter conservatory at Kingsmere, its cracked flues, failing brickwork, warped frames, and neglected planting beds. She had drawn the plans during a visit with her aunt, when Helena had left her waiting for hours beside the glasshouse. What is this? Godfrey asked. A repair plan. Isabella kept her eyes on the vellum. The southern flue has failed. The old border beds may still be sound, but the roof must be reglazed before winter. He studied her calculations. You made these? Yes. Theodosia gave an impatient sound. She passes time with unfeminine notions. Godfrey ignored her. You will not take charity. Very well. Kingsmere's conservatory must be restored before the 12th night ball. I will commission you to do it. Theodosia gasped. Your Grace, she is a lady. She is also plainly a botanist. He looked at Isabella. Will you undertake the work? 4 months, a ruined glasshouse, a county waiting to see her fail, paid work, a door with no one else's hand upon the latch. I will, Isabella said, on 3 conditions. My fee is paid through the estate office in my own name. I direct the planting and repairs within the agreed sum, and there are no private gifts. Godfrey's brows rose, but not in mockery. You are severe in negotiation, Miss Wycliffe. I have no fortune with which to survive a generous misunderstanding. For the first time that night,
Something almost like admiration softened his anger. Agreed. Isabella followed her aunt from the library. She had gained 4 months of work, and perhaps a future beyond Darnley Manor.
She had also seen Helena's face before the door closed. The blow on the terrace had been only the first one. The Kingsmere conservatory smelled of wet brick, dead leaves, and old soot. On Isabella's first morning, the estate steward, 2 gardeners, and a carpenter were already present. She wore a linen apron over her oldest day dress and stood upon a low ladder examining the cracked flue when heavy boots sounded behind her. Godfrey entered in riding clothes, wind in his dark hair, and purpose in every stride. "I have sent to London for an entirely new iron frame," he announced. "The old house will be pulled down. New glass, new heating pipes, new beds. We shall begin again." Isabella descended the ladder. "Cancel the order." He stopped. The carpenter became deeply interested in his measuring cord. "Cancel it," Godfrey repeated. "Yes, Your Grace. If you tear down the northern wall, you destroy the old heated border and the rootstock beneath it. The brick retains warmth better than the thin, fashionable work you have ordered. You would spend twice as much to kill what may still be living." His jaw tightened. Isabella waited for the command that would end her employment before it had properly begun. Instead, he looked at the wall. "What do you propose?" "We repair the flues, replace only the unsound frames, and have panes cut to the old pattern. Lime mortar for the brick. No alteration to the border until I know what survives beneath it." He took another long look at her drawings. "Make the list," he said. "I will send a man to the glazier today." "Your steward may send him." Godfrey's mouth twitched. "You object even to my riding into town." "I object to losing the person who approves my accounts when there is work requiring his signature." A surprised laugh escaped the carpenter. He smothered it in a cough. Godfrey looked at Isabella for a moment, then laughed as well, briefly, without offense. "Very well. Mr. Pritchard may keep me from interfering with the mortar." He crossed to the potting table, where the estate ledger occupied the center, and Isabella's plans had been pushed to one edge. Without comment, he moved the ledger aside and spread her drawings in the middle. The place of command. It was a small act. No one else seemed to notice it. Isabella did. For years, she had worked at the corners of other people's tables. She stepped forward and placed both hands beside her plans. The work found its rhythm. At sunrise, Isabella tested soil-marked damaged frames and directed the gardeners. By mid-morning, Godfrey usually appeared. He was incapable of observing labor without joining it. He carried timber, climbed ladders, argued with suppliers, and once attempted to clear an entire bed before Isabella informed him that he was uprooting dormant lilies. He replaced every bulb under her supervision. He also learned slowly that assistance offered after a question was not the same as command disguised as kindness. One late September afternoon, a cart carrying the replacement panes broke an axle in the lower lane. Dark clouds were gathering over the hills. Isabella found Godfrey in the stable yard, demanding his horse. "The merchant swore the glass would arrive before noon," he said. "I shall fetch him back by the collar if necessary." Riding after him will not move the crates. Godfrey gathered the reins, his gelding stamped beneath him. "The rain will reach the lane within 20 minutes, Isabella continued. "The carpenters have gone. I need hands, not vengeance." For one fierce second, anger and usefulness fought across his face. Then he dropped from the saddle, handed the reins to a groom, and seized the handles of the estate handcart. "Lead on, Miss Wycliffe." They reached the stranded wagon, with 2 footmen and a gardener as the first drops fell. Godfrey lifted the heavy crates, while Isabella checked each wooden brace. Mud dragged at her skirts. Rain darkened his linen shirt and ran from his hair into his eyes. One crate shifted as they lifted it from the wagon. Isabella caught the lower frame at the same instant Godfrey reached across her. Their wet hands struck upon the wood, his fingers closing over hers for one startled breath. The rain was cold enough to numb her knuckles. His palm was astonishingly warm. "Have you the weight?" he asked. "Yes." He did not remove his hand until she had secured her grip. Together they carried the pane toward the conservatory, shoulders nearly touching beneath the narrow crate. Neither spoke. The warmth of him remained against her fingers long after the rain should have washed it away. The final pane reached the conservatory just before the downpour became a sheet of water against the roof. Godfrey leaned against the potting bench, breathing hard. Isabella wiped rain from her face with the back of her wrist. He looked at the unbroken crates and began to laugh. "You were right," he said. "My temper would have reached the merchant after the glass was ruined." "Speed is not always the answer. I am beginning to suspect you intend to prove that daily." Mrs. Bell had left a brown earthenware pot wrapped in flannel near the stove. Godfrey poured tea into 2 cups, then paused. "There is something else." He drew a folded paper from the inner pocket of his coat and placed it upon the bench. Isabella opened it. Her mother's ivory rose seeds rested inside, clean and dry, more than she had managed to gather beneath the terrace lamps. Her throat tightened. "Where did you find these?" "I returned after the guests had gone. The lamps were still burning." He looked almost embarrassed by the admission. "I thought you would count them." Of course she would have counted them. Every one carried the possibility of a flower her mother's hands had once touched. No one had ever gone back for what Isabella lost. Others told her not to grieve small things. Godfrey had knelt in gravel after midnight because he understood they were not small to her. "Thank you," she said. The words came unevenly. "Thank you, Your Grace." "Godfrey." She looked up. He did not insist. He only stood there, wet and watchful, while the rain drummed above them. "Will you plant them?" he asked. Isabella filled a shallow wooden tray with prepared loam. At the far end of the house, the gardener and footman worked beneath the leaking eaves. Godfrey remained beside her, near enough to help, and careful not to touch anything without leave. "May I plant one?" She placed a seed in his palm. He pressed it too deeply into the earth. "No!" Isabella caught his knuckles before he could bury it farther. "Nearer the surface. It must feel the winter before it knows when to wake." His hand stilled beneath hers. "Nearer the surface," he repeated. She guided his thumb upward. For one breath, neither moved. Then Isabella released him and reached for the next seed. Godfrey set a cup of tea beside her rather than placing it into her dirty hands. He was learning to notice where she left room. That frightened her more than his temper. Anger could be resisted. Being seen invited hope. A week later, the conservatory doors opened with a hard bang. Helena entered in a dark velvet pelisse, Theodosia close behind her. The steward had gone to the estate office, but 3 workmen remained in the western bay, and Mrs. Bell stood near the stove. Godfrey descended the iron ladder in 2 swift movements. "You were refused at the front door," he said. "How did you come here?" "Your servants remain aware of my rank, even if you do not." Helena surveyed the repaired walls with open dislike. "The county is talking. An unmarried woman spends every day in a bachelor's glasshouse, and you expect respectable people to admire the arrangement." "The glasshouse is full of estate workers," Isabella said. Theodosia clasped her hands. "Come home, Isabella. Helena has offered to preserve your reputation. The work may be presented under her direction, and you may return to your proper place." There it was. Not propriety. Erasure. "My commission bears my name," Isabella said. "So will the garden." Helena moved toward the seedling bench. Pale green shoots had begun to rise from the tray. You mistake stubbornness for consequence. With a light movement of her gloved hand, she knocked the tray to the floor. Wood struck brick, soil scattered. 2 tender shoots snapped beneath the edge of the broken frame. Godfrey crossed the space before Isabella had drawn breath. His hand closed upon the back of a chair beside Helena, stopping inches from her shoulder. The wood creaked beneath his grip. His face had gone white with rage. Godfrey. Isabella spoke his name only once. He looked at her. She shook her head. Helena wanted his violence. A roaring duke would make Isabella appear the cause of every excess. Another rescue would leave her standing behind him while the county discussed his temper instead of Helena's cruelty. Godfrey's fingers loosened from the chair. His chest still heaved. He stepped between Helena and the remaining trays, but he did not speak for Isabella. What do you wish done, Miss Wycliffe? Helena gave a contemptuous laugh. You ask the servant. Isabella looked at the broken shoots. The tears came close, hot and humiliating. She held them where they belonged. I wish Mrs. Darnley and Lady Helena shown out, she said quietly. Their names are to be removed from the workman's gate. Godfrey turned. His anger had not cooled. It had found direction. You heard her. Mrs. Bell, send for the steward. Neither lady is to enter Kingsmere land again without Miss Wycliffe's express consent. Helena's face altered. For the first time, she understood that Isabella's word had become an order in this place. You will regret giving her such license. No, Godfrey said. I regret not seeing sooner what you do with power. Helena swept out. Theodosia followed, pale with outrage. When the doors closed, Godfrey looked at the spilled earth. His hands were shaking. He knelt in the dirt and began gathering the bruised seedlings into the broken tray. Isabella knelt opposite him. You stopped, she said. I wanted to tear the doors from their hinges. I wanted every house in the county closed to her. I know. He pressed soil around a bent root. When I was 14, my father held a winter assembly here. My mother corrected an account before his friends. He sent her to the lake pavilion and ordered her to remain until she could speak with proper humility. Isabella's hand stilled. The pavilion stood beyond the south lawn, a stone folly open to the wind. I moved to follow her, Godfrey said. My father told me that if I crossed the room, I was no son of his. So I remained beside the fire while the music played. His mouth tightened. When the guests left, I ran to her. She had collapsed. Fever settled in her chest, and she died 3 days later. The words were plain. That made them worse. I have hated stillness ever since, he said. When harm begins, I move. I do not think. I cannot bear to be that boy again. Isabella understood then why his kindness arrived like cavalry, fast, forceful, trampling whatever stood between him and the person he meant to save. You caught Helena's wrist because once you did not cross a room, she said. Godfrey flinched. She looked down at her soil-stained fingers. But when you decide for me, before I can speak, I disappear behind you. He said nothing. The slap was not the worst of that night, Isabella continued. The worst was how quickly everyone accepted that she had the right to do it. I have spent 10 years making myself useful enough to keep and quiet enough not to resent. I will not exchange that silence for another kind, however kindly meant. One tear escaped. She did not turn away from him. I do not need you to fight every room for me, she said. I need you to leave me standing when it is my turn to answer. Godfrey set the seedling down. His hand moved toward hers, then stopped above it.
He waited.
Isabella turned her palm upward. His fingers rested against hers, light despite their strength. "Then I will ask," he said. "And when you answer, I will stand where you place me." The warning came the following morning, in a note from Theodosia. Helena intended to attend the 12th night ball and announced that the restored conservatory had been designed under her patronage. Several ladies had already received letters describing Isabella as an ungrateful dependent dismissed from Darnley Manor for deceit. The threat was not subtle. Helena meant to take the garden, then used the scandal surrounding Godfrey to make every denial sound like seduction. That evening, Isabella returned to Darnley Manor. Her aunt sat in the parlor with embroidery upon her lap. "You have one final choice," Theodosia said. "Sign the designs over to Helena. State that the Duke misunderstood what occurred at the garden ball. You may keep your room here. And if I refuse, you leave tomorrow, without a character. No respectable household will engage you." Isabella looked at the narrow parlor, the chair she had never been invited to claim as her own, the work-basket always waiting beside it. Once the small room upstairs had seemed safer than uncertainty. Now she knew the price of remaining. She went to her chamber and packed her mother's seed papers, 3 gowns, her aprons, and the botanical notebooks she had hidden beneath the lining of her trunk. The first installment of her fee lay in the estate office, paid exactly as the contract required. Before midnight, a carrier's cart took her to the old gardener's cottage near the vicarage. The vicar's wife had agreed to witness the lease and help her obtain a respectable woman for the mornings. The cottage roof sagged over one corner. Its hearth smoked. The bedstead protested when Isabella sat upon it. It was hers for 6 months. She slept more soundly there than she had beneath her aunt's roof in 10 years. The next morning, Godfrey was pacing the conservatory when she arrived. "You left Darnley Manor." He came toward her. "Mrs. Bell has prepared—" He stopped himself. Isabella waited. Godfrey drew a breath. "What do you need?" The question warmed her more than the rooms he had nearly offered. "I have leased the gardener's cottage. My fee covers the rent. I will finish the conservatory and establish a small nursery there in spring." His gaze searched her face. "And Helena?" "You will invite her to 12th night." "No!" The answer burst from him. Then he closed his eyes briefly. "Forgive me. Tell me why. If you bar her, she will say I hid behind your title. Let her come. Let her make her claim where the work can answer her. They may try to have you removed before you speak. I ask only that you prevent that." Godfrey's jaw tightened. She could see the instinct to close gates post men and end the danger by force. Instead, he bowed his head. "You have my word." 12th night came beneath a hard frost. Outside, ice feathered every glass pane. The wind cut tears from the eyes of guests crossing the carriage sweep, and their breath hung white before them as footmen hurried to open the conservatory doors. They entered with cloaks stiffened by cold and gloved hands held close to their bodies. Inside, winter had been persuaded to bloom. Warmth traveled steadily through the repaired brick flues. Shoulders lowered, gloves loosened. Damp hems began to dry beside the planting beds, and color returned to cheeks made pale by the wind. Candlelight multiplied in the new panes. Paper whites and amaryllis rose from the restored beds, while dark leaves climbed the iron supports in carefully trained lines. The heart of the room was the ivory rose. Not every seed had lived. Enough had. Pale blossoms curved over the central arch, their petals luminous against the frost-darkened glass beyond. Isabella's mother had bred the rose for cold soil and stubborn roots. It had survived neglect, broken glass, and a satin slipper. The county arrived in silk velvet and curiosity. Isabella wore the same cream gown she had worn at the garden ball, altered at the sleeves and newly pressed. She chose it deliberately. She would not dress as though the woman struck beneath the summer roses had been someone she wished to hide. Helena entered in crimson Theodosia beside her, and 3 dowagers following close behind. Godfrey stood near the main doors. His body held the same restless power Isabella had first seen on the terrace, but now it waited under command. When their eyes met, he did not cross the room. He waited for her signal. The quartet ended a country dance. Before the musicians could begin again, Helena moved beneath the ivory arch. "My lords and ladies," she called, "I am pleased to welcome you to the Winter Garden, conceived during my former association with Kingsmere." Polite applause fluttered and died. Helena smiled toward Isabella. "Regrettably, the execution of my design was entrusted to a dependent companion who mistook proximity to a duke for consequence. Most of you know why she was dismissed from her aunt's home." A silence opened. Theodosia stepped forward. "Miss Wycliffe has no place among honorable guests. She should be removed before this spectacle worsens." She reached for Isabella's arm. Godfrey moved. He placed himself between them in 3 strides and caught Theodosia's hand before it touched Isabella. He released it at once, but he did not yield an inch. "No one removes Miss Wycliffe from my house." His voice carried through the glasshouse, hot with feeling and steady in purpose. "I ended my engagement to Lady Helena because I saw her strike a woman she believed unable to answer. Miss Wycliffe neither sought that decision nor owed me gratitude for it. The fault and the consequence were mine." A murmur ran through the officers near the door. The elderly colonel nearest them gave Godfrey one grave nod. Then he stepped away from Helena's party, leaving a visible gap beside her, before turning his shoulder toward the central arch. Mrs. Penrose, who had retreated from Isabella upon the terrace, lowered her eyes. She moved several steps away from Helena and drew her daughter with her. Lady Marchmont lowered her fan and stared at Theodosia with open disgust. Godfrey looked at Isabella. "Do you wish me to close the doors and end the ball?" The room waited upon her answer. "No, Your Grace." Isabella walked past him and stopped beneath the roses. "The doors remain open." Her voice did not tremble. "Lady Helena claims this garden. Then she may tell you why ash was mixed with the lime mortar in the northern flue. She may identify which border was left undisturbed because the old rootstock lay beneath it. She may explain why these roses required frost before warmth." Helena's lips parted. Isabella touched one pale blossom. "She cannot. I can. I drew the plans. I directed the repairs. I mixed the soil, kept the accounts, and raised these plants from seed bred by my mother, Lady Ophelia Wycliffe." She turned toward the gathered guests. "My aunt called truth a luxury. Lady Helena called my work rubbish. Both believed that because I depended upon them, my name could be removed from anything my hands created." Isabella looked directly at Helena. "It cannot." Nothing more was needed. The proof stood living around them. Lady Marchmont crossed the room first. She examined the nearest bloom, then faced Isabella. "My gardener has failed for 6 years to produce a winter climber in our south house," she said. "Will you advise him, Miss Wycliffe?" Isabella's breath caught. "I would be pleased to, my lady." A second voice followed, then a third. Questions about soil frames, spring planting, and commissions replaced the whispers about seduction. Theodosia's face lost color. Isabella turned to her. "You told me I would starve without your roof. I have leased the cottage near the vicarage. In spring I shall open a nursery there. I am no longer your dependent." Theodosia looked around for support and found none. 2 dowagers had stepped away from her.
A gentleman who had once sought Helena's favor offered Lady Marchmont his arm instead. Helena stood beneath the roses she had tried to claim alone, in a crimson gown. Lady Marchmont opened her fan with a crisp snap and turned her back upon her. Isabella did not need to humiliate Helena further. She turned toward Godfrey. He remained where she had placed him, near enough to protect her from force, far enough that the victory belonged unmistakably to her. Pride burned in his face. Not possession. Recognition.
Isabella crossed the space between them and held out her bare hand. "Your Grace," she said, "will you dance with me?" His eyes dropped to her work-roughened fingers. "The honor is mine." He bowed and took her hand only after she placed it in his. The quartet began a waltz. Its first sweeping measure rose through the conservatory and carried every conversation with it, covering Helena's presence as completely as though she had already left. The dance was still considered daring enough to make the oldest ladies murmur, but Lady Marchmont smiled and ordered the musicians to continue. Godfrey led Isabella onto the floor beneath the ivory roses. He did not pull her too close. He waited for her step, then matched it. For once, the entire county watched Isabella without looking past her. She discovered that being seen did not feel like exposure when the person beside her had learned not to eclipse her. By April, the gardener's cottage had trellises against both walls and trays of seedlings beneath every window. Isabella had 3 estate commissions, 2 village customers, and a waiting list for her mother's ivory rose. The roof no longer leaked. The hearth still smoked in an east wind, but it was her smoke, her roof, and her account book upon the table. Godfrey visited openly, usually with the vicar's wife in the adjoining garden, and never without asking whether Isabella had time to receive him. He remained incapable of arriving slowly. His horse always reached the gate at an unnecessary pace. That morning he dismounted with a small clay pot cradled in one arm. The cottage door stood open behind Isabella. Warm air from her hearth slipped across the threshold and touched Godfrey's shoulder as he approached. He paused there for one brief moment, a duke waiting at the entrance to a world she had made without him. "I brought the letters regarding the Kingsmere borders," he said, setting a packet upon the bench. "And this." A single green seedling rose from the pot. Isabella recognized the leaf at once. "The seed Helena crushed," Godfrey said. "I found it in the gravel that night. I planted it in my study because I did not know whether it was alive, and because I feared you would tell me I had buried it too deeply." A laugh escaped her before she could stop it. He smiled. "It appears to have inherited your refusal to die where others place it." Isabella touched the small leaf. "It needs open ground." Godfrey looked toward the cottage wall, then back to her. "He did not choose the place. Where shall we plant it?" She studied him for a moment. The Duke, who had once tried to solve every hurt before asking, now stood outside her planting bed, with soil upon his glove and patience in his face. "Beside the front door," she said. Together they knelt. Isabella loosened the earth. Godfrey held the seedling steady. When the root was covered, he sat back upon his heels, but did not rise. "There is another question," he said. His voice had lost none of its warmth, but the words came with unusual care. "I know you require no rescue. I know this house and this work are yours. I would not ask you to surrender either." He opened one hand between them. "But I love you, Isabella. May I build my life beside yours?" The answer rose too quickly. "No." Isabella looked beyond him through the open cottage door. She saw the patched plaster, the plain table, the botanical ledgers arranged in her own order, and the narrow stair leading to a bedchamber no one had granted her as an act of mercy. Every imperfect inch had been secured by work performed in her own name. Then she looked at the signet upon Godfrey's hand. Between this cottage and Kingsmere
lay more than a road. There were servants, tenants, titles, expectations, and generations of men accustomed to having their wishes obeyed. A great house could swallow a woman's name without ever raising its voice.
For one breath, Isabella saw herself dressed in silk beneath the Kingsmere roof, praised as a duchess, admired as his wife, and slowly forgotten as a botanist. The refusal reached her tongue. Then she saw the clay pot resting between them. Godfrey had carried the seedling to her door. He had not planted it upon his estate, chosen its wall, or assumed that because he had rescued it, it belonged to him. Soil marked his glove. His hand remained open. Behind him, the warmth of her hearth continued to pass through the doorway. He had not stepped inside merely because the door stood open. He was waiting, even now, though waiting cost him more than action ever had. "My nursery remains mine," Isabella said, "entirely. My commissions remain in my name." "Yes. And you will not order new glasshouses, dismiss gardeners, purchase land, or alter a single border without consulting me." A trace of his old fire brightened his eyes. "I shall attempt heroism of a more modest kind."
She did not smile immediately. "And if I choose to remain in this cottage for part of every year? Then I shall learn whether a duke may be useful in a cottage garden." The fear did not vanish. Old wounds did not surrender simply because love asked politely. But Isabella no longer mistook fear for prophecy. She placed her soil-stained hand in his. "Yes, Godfrey." He drew one sharp breath. Even then he did not pull her toward him until she leaned first. Isabella kissed him beneath the new trellis, while the ivory seedling stood between their knees, its first green leaf turned toward the spring light. It had survived because someone went back for it. It would flourish because at last it had been given a place of its own.